Bastille Day celebrations getting underway here in France. A national holiday named after the fall of a fortress that marked the start of the French Revolution of 1789. It is Europe's oldest, Europe's largest military parade. Today, more than 5,000 military personnel, police taking part, marching down or flying above the iconic Champs-Élysées Avenue. French President Emmanuel Macron has a guest of honor this year. It's India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Earlier this Friday, he awarded Modi the Legion d'honneur. That is a top honor here in France. The two countries also marking 25 years of what they call their strategic partnership. Let's cross to the Champs-Élysées, speak to Philip Turle. Hello to you, Philip. A big day, an annual highlight on the French calendar here. Bastille Day, the French calling it 14 Juillet. What's it like where you are, Philip?
Well, there's a certain calm in the Champs-Élysées right now, William, as everyone is waiting for the parade to get underway. And it starts with Emmanuel Macron, the president, who will be driven down the Champs-Élysées before inspecting all the forces, next to the head of the French Armed Forces himself, who will be accompanying the president. That will be the marking of the opening of this 14th of July military parade. And as you were saying, there are many different regiments that will be parading down the Champs-Élysées. I'll give you some of the figures, if you like, we're going to see over the next couple of hours once this march gets underway. 6,500 participants, 5,100 on foot, 60 planes, 25 helicopters, 157 vehicles, 62 motorbikes, and 200 horses from the Republican Guard, plus, of course, a flyover by the acrobatic Patrouille de France, which is the French equivalent of the Red Arrow. So a very spectacular parade which is going to take place. You mentioned Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, who is the guest of honor this year. There will also be Indian participants in this parade today. They will be joining the French forces as they walk down or travel down the Champs-Élysées to be inspected at the Place de la Concorde, which is about 100 yards in front of me. So just a little while to go now before this parade gets underway.
Yeah, Philip, at the top there, you mentioned it's calm. Are the festivities toned down this year?
I don't think they are. It looks just as, I think, sophisticated and busy as usual. Just behind me up the Champs-Élysées, you may be able to see the Foreign Legion. They're the ones who open this parade. They will kick it off, and it will be all of the military will be parading one after the other down the Champs-Élysées, right down to the gendarmerie and the local police between now and 12 o'clock French time over the next couple of hours. But I think where there is concern in France at the moment is not here at the Champs-Élysées, not on the morning of the 14th of July, but as you were mentioning, there have been many widespread protests in France in the past few weeks following the shooting dead of a young man by a policeman. There is worry that there could be protests later today, so many extra police forces being brought in to some of the major cities and towns around the country. And also there have been calls for fireworks to not be let off in some of the major cities around the country as well.
All right, Philip, thank you very much. Philip Turle reporting from Place de la Concorde. Joining me on the set is a French major. We're calling him just Antoine, dictated by French security protocol. Hello, Major. Thank you for joining us here on the set. Still waiting to see that parade get underway. You yourself have participated in Bastille Day celebrations before. Tell us a bit about that.
It was approximately 13 years ago. I was a young cadet officer in Saint-Cyr Academy. I marched down the Champs-Élysées for approximately a kilometer down, and it was a great honor to be there.
Is the excitement on the side of the street? There are lots of people yelling, families watching this. For someone participating, is it the same sort of excitement? Is it nerve-wracking or is it exhausting?
Actually, it's twofold, I would say. It's you're proud. You see all the people applauding, and you're a bit stressed, a bit like an operation. You're proud to serve your country. You're proud to go down the Champs-Élysées, and also a bit of stress because you have to make one big group to be as pretty as possible.
Yeah, for our viewers who might not be familiar with it, there's a logistical nightmare in the run-up to Bastille Day, with many parts of the city being blocked off. We also see the military aircraft flying into the capital ahead of it. How large of a organizational feat is this? Who organizes it? How much time do you spend rehearsing before the actual day of the parade?
We usually say that next year's parade starts tonight. So it's a whole year planning process. We start designating who will be marching next year. And for the actual marching parade and the air show and the land show, it's approximately 15 days of rehearsal.
All right, well, let's get another feel for how things are going on the ground and speak to our reporter, Claire Paquelin. Hello to you, Claire. You're on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Tell us a little bit about what the atmosphere is like.
Well, I'm here with the crowds on the Champs-Élysées who've come to watch those who will be marching and taking part in this parade. I just spoke to a family, two parents who come to see their son, who is in the band with his wife. They're both in the band, and they are really excited to see their son. In about 20 minutes' time, the music will be beginning. He plays the saxophone. I also spoke to a family who've come to see their son, who's a firefighter and who has been working very hard in the last couple of weeks here in Paris and in the outskirts of Paris during the riots. Firefighters have been doing a lot of good work putting out the blazes. So yeah, nervous excitement, I would say, because many of the people who are here watching are family and friends of those who will be taking part.
What have some of the people been telling you?
People have been telling me that they are just so curious to see this up close because millions of French people watch this parade on their televisions. But actually people who've come here today, most of them to see family and friends who are marching, they're just so excited to see it up close. We've got more than 5,000 troops who'll be marching past us in the next half hour. Also military hardware, in the skies, helicopters, the Rafale fighter jet. This really is something to be seen. A lot of people have been telling me this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I've spoken to people who've come from the south of France who drove for 12 hours to get here so that they could get front row seats at this military parade. So certainly, yeah, I would say people here are really pleased to be here. They've chosen to be here. Security is very tight, as you can imagine. It's now been closed off, so those who managed to get here close to the parade, they had to come here early and line up. Now anyone else who wants to get to where I'm standing, well, it wouldn't be possible. There are many policemen who are really manning all of the entries onto the Champs-Élysées. We have had these serious riots in the last fortnight in France, so security here is particularly tight.
All right, Claire, thank you very much. Claire Paquelin reporting from the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Earlier this week, Claire met an Indian contingent that will be taking part in the parade this Friday. India, of course, the guest of honor alongside the French troops. There's a 269-strong contingent, soldiers from the Indian Army, the Navy, the Air Force. For more, let's speak to Saurav Jha, director of the Delhi Defense Review. Hello to you. Thank you for speaking to France 24. How big of an honor is it for Narendra Modi to get, I'm not sure if you're aware, just moments ago, he got the Légion d'honneur, one of the top honors here in France. Talk to us a little bit about how big of an honor that is for India's Prime Minister.
Well, it's substantial, although he has got such honors from other states around the world as well. But then, pomp and pageantry are always used to show the approximation between states which are already close to each other.
Yeah, and we're seeing this just weeks after he got a red carpet rollout in Washington, a White House state dinner. Why is India being courted so much by Western democracies?
Well, the answer in one word is certainly not China. China is a factor, but India in its own right is also important for the world economy that is in the making at the moment. Because you need a new trusted production partner, and India is that partner. Only India has the scale, India has the technical resources, and indeed the overall human resources to be the so-called plus one in the China plus one. It's also a large market, so that is there as well. People talk about China's economy being that much larger than India's, but its consumer market is actually not that much larger than India's, because consumption is still less than 40% of Chinese GDP, whereas in India's case, consumption is 60% of India's GDP. So even though the Chinese economy is larger, the consumption economy is not that much larger as you would imagine. So India has a lot going for it. It's got demographics in its favor. It's got the market, and it is now emerging as a production site.
Yeah, in 25 years of the so-called strategic partnership between France and India, as for the leaders, on Thursday, while speaking to Indians living here in France, Narendra Modi called Emmanuel Macron a friend. A moment ago on the screen, we were watching Modi speaking to First Lady Brigitte. Just how close are Emmanuel Macron and Narendra Modi?
Well, this question doesn't really matter. The real question is how close are India and France? And although the strategic partnership is supposedly 25 years old in officialese, it goes way back. The degree of proximity that India and France share on the world stage are, I won't say unrivaled, but they are rivaled by few other relationships. And I can quote a few examples. For instance, India's fast breeder reactor technology had a significant amount of French input in it. And I'm talking about the 60s and 70s. India's space program received the Viking engine, which became the Vikas engine and was the workhorse for a long time. Still is, but of course, it's retired now. Although it's been modified and is going to be used on other launchers. So what I'm trying to say is that the degree of closeness between India and France has always been there. And what you're seeing is continuity. So I'm not surprised at all. Macron and Modi cannot but be close to each other.
Yeah, and on Thursday, India's defense ministry announced plans to buy another 26 French-made Rafale fighter jets, as well as 3 more Scorpion-class submarines. Sometimes military deals like this that are worth billions of euros can hit a snag. How likely do you think this one will go through?
Well, let's be clear about one thing. They have already been given approval by India's Defense Acquisition Council, which is headed by the Minister of Defense. And in principle, approval by the DSE is actually the most significant step in India's multi-stage procurement process. Now, as far as snags are concerned, there aren't going to be any snags as long as India's requirements on the technology sharing, indigenous content, that is basically industrial work share agreements are on that front are met. See, India today supplies things to France as well. I'll give you an example. The LEAP engine, which is used in many narrow-body airlines. The titanium casings for that, the other metallic casings for that, parts from the hot section, are actually supplied by Indian industry to Safran, which is, of course, France's main OEM for engines. So it's not one way; it's two way, and I think these deals are very likely to fructify in the near future.
All right, Saurav, thank you very much, Saurav Jha, speaking to us from New Delhi. Major, just a question also, from your perspective, we'll listen to him discuss a strategic partnership between France and India. Can you tell us a bit more about what that means on the ground in terms of cooperation?
Exactly. Strategic partnership is also how we work together on the field, on airfield, on the naval space. So it runs through different exercises. This year we've had Indian forces, Indian Rafale, coming into a French exercise called Volfa exercise, and it participated into the interoperability. That means working together. So it's a whole year exercise challenge.
Saurav also mentioned that he thought there were few partnerships in the world that could rival this French and Indian alliance. Is it that significant?
I think it is, because we have a strategic partnership means that we have a common interest in the Indian Ocean. We're the only European country that has a footstep in the Indian Ocean, so that it's a really strong bond.
He also mentioned, though, it's not because of China's rising influence that Macron is giving these top honors to Modi, courting India.
The interest is, I think, is worldwide, specifically for the Indo-Pacific region. So it's also for the Pacific, but for the Indian Ocean zone.
Looking at the Bastille Day images, we're seeing Emmanuel Macron riding down the Champs-Élysées Avenue. He's inspecting the troops. Tell us a little bit about the ceremony that's unfolding here.
So here you have President Macron. As you recall, he's head of the armed forces, French armed forces. The different units who are here on the Champs-Élysées are giving him the honors. So as he runs down, every unit's flag is horizontally being shed, and now he will start the marching parade in a few minutes.
Yeah, and then a little while later, we're going to have one of the first performances, international military band, 75 musicians from France's partners in Africa's Sahel region. The headwinds have shifted in Africa. France is having to redefine its military presence there. What are some of the challenges moving forward for France's armed forces?
I think that's exactly the term that we have to use. It's redefine our partnership with our African partners. It's according to their needs. And we have what we call the operational military partnership that will be able to train all the military personnel from our African partners. So we have to redefine exactly the needs in close relation to our strategic partners.
You've also been stationed in France's overseas territories. Are the Bastille Day celebrations observed with the same sort of vigor as they might be in France over there?
Even more. Even more. If take, for instance, in La Réunion, I talked yesterday with one of the old commanding officer of the regiment, the unit who is stationed there, told me that he had never seen such honor and happiness over the French military parade on this island.
Obviously, they don't have the Champs-Élysées Avenue, but what are their local festivities like there?
You also have military parades, but you also have static demonstrations. You bond with the population, so you have to show your capacity, your equipment, and to show how servicemen serve their country.
You come from a military family. I'm American. Growing up, our national holiday, Independence Day, on July 4th. We're going to parks, we're watching fireworks, but it's very local. It feels very local. The scene on our screens right now, this is a national event. It's something that, anyone across the country can watch, overseas as well. In the U.S., there are Bastille Day celebrations by the Alliance Française. When you're growing up as a little boy in a military family, is this something that serves as a source of inspiration?
It is. It's definitely a source of inspiration. Bastille Day is not only a French military parade, it's the link between the armed forces and its population. There has been a major effort, a budget effort this year for the armed forces, and we have to show them how we use it and how we use this budget. And it's.
What do you mean by budget effort?
Budget effort is the military program act that has been acted yesterday by the French.
What came out of that?
It's a huge effort to have, I would say, a threefold challenge: operational challenge to make sure that we are up to the challenges of our strategic partnerships. It's an equipment challenge, a capacity challenge in order to upgrade our equipment and to face the different challenges that we'll have to face in the future.
And Emmanuel Macron, French president, would you say he's military friendly? We've heard him call for the creation of a independent European army. In regards to the French armed forces, do you feel like you have the president's backing?
I think in order to create a European army, you would first talk about a European defense, and it's already going on. We had last year the strategic compass that have been published. It's the political, I would say, background to make sure that we have a common interest in Europe, and you have also the equipment part of European challenges.
Are there other EU countries that might be a little bit more hesitant about a independent European army?
You obviously have different interests inside the European Union. That what makes the creation of a European army quite difficult. So I think you have to take it step by step.
When we were looking at these celebrations, Emmanuel Macron, going down the Champs-Élysées, just wondering, you were telling us at the top that, was it 2010 that you participated?
13 years ago, exactly.
13 years ago. You haven't been back. Is that by choice or by accident? Does this make you nostalgic to participate again?
I would love to participate again. It's I served more than 6 years in units, and I have always been either abroad or not available for to do the marching parade in Paris. But I did other marching parades in other cities in France.
Okay. Now Emmanuel Macron, I believe, is he arriving there at Place de la Concorde?
Yes, he is.
It looks like.
He is. He is followed by the French Chief of Staff, General Burkhard. He will go down and salute the different Chief of Staff, different services from the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, Space and Air Force. Here he is welcomed by Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne and the Defense Minister right to her side.
Yeah, and we're seeing 5,000, more than 5,000 people taking part. Is this on par with what we've seen in previous years?
Pretty much, more or less, 5,000
Obviously,
troops.
pandemic excluding.
Of course, pandemic excluded. 5,000 is the, I would say, tip of the iceberg, because it's more than 6,000 if you take the whole number for security, for support, and all the coordination teams that make this a great parade.
Yeah, and then not to mention the number of police that have been deployed nationwide as well. Security tight this Friday.
They're, I would say, every year they're quite tight, as your journalist would say a few minutes ago. People are either invited, they came in early this morning, and now place to the show.
Let's speak to our reporter, Claire Paquelin, again. Claire, we've just been watching Emmanuel Macron make his way down the Champs-Élysées Avenue, saluting the troops. He must have passed by you. What was it like?
Well, yes, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and his chief of staff, Thierry Burkhard, they passed by reviewing the troops, and actually everyone was quiet. It was quite a moving moment. They were, of course, accompanied by the Republican Guard on horseback, and as they went past, people started clapping softly. And the two gentlemen who are with me now were also quite moved by that. Can you tell me, Michael, you marched in 2012 in the Bastille Day Parade. What does it feel like to do that?
Yes, I was there in 2012 at the end of our cursus. It was very intense. It was only good memories. We were very proud to be on the parade. And apparently 2 years after, my cousin Guillaume followed my step in the Polytechnic school. And yes, it was very good memories and very intense ceremony.
And Guillaume, why are you here today?
Yeah, so after marching 9 years ago, I came back today to see my younger brother, who's also going to march in 10 minutes or something. So we're really excited and proud about him, to see him today.
And how did it feel when you marched? What's it like to be, you know millions of people are watching?
Yeah, it's very exciting, and you're in the middle of the most beautiful avenue in the world in Paris here. So that's really a pride moment in your either your career or our studies for us. So you never forget these memories.
And your little brother, have you spoken to him today? How's he feeling?
No, I haven't. So he's really focusing, together with his colleagues, and we'll have lunch afterwards together. So.
A little celebration.
Exactly.
Well, listen, Guillaume, Michael, thank you so much for
Yes,
speaking
thank you
to
very
me.
much.
Enjoy the day, and I hope you will be able to manage to see your little brother as he goes past. Probably in about 15, 20 minutes or so, the marching troops will start walking down the Champs-Élysées to the Place de la Concorde.
Claire, stay with us just real quickly. With some of the people in the audience, do you get a feel if it's families, if it's young, if it's old when you look around you?
There's a really, really, really big mix. In front of me, I've got a young girl who looks like she's about 10 or 11 years old. I've seen grandparents who've come to see their children, wives who've come to see their husbands, husbands have come to see their wives as too. It really is a mix of people of various different ages. I've also spoken to an Indian family who are based here in Paris, but they've come here for the first time to see the Bastille Day parade because, of course, the Indians are the guests of honor and they're here to see the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force and the Indian Navy, who will be right up the front, just behind the Foreign Legion. They'll be right up the front, parading down very shortly the Champs-Élysées Avenue, right to the Place de la Concorde.
All right, Claire, thank you very much. Claire Paquelin reporting. Major, you wanted to say something on the back of what she was saying.
Yes, he was saying that a lot of young people there. It's one of those theme this year for the Bastille Day parade, the young generation. It's really important for them and all the young population to see that how well the military is protecting them. And they have the second theme is the moral forces. Yeah. So it's very important for them to see how we pass on through our tradition, our way of service to the young generation.
Yeah, and a play on words, the moral forces, French people loving their jeu de mots as well with that. Emmanuel Macron inspecting the troops again, I believe. Let's listen in a little bit to what's happening.
Président de la République, les honneurs militaires vous ont été rendus par un détachement de la garde républicaine, régiment d'infanterie. L'ensemble étant commandé par le colonel Frédéric Poulain, commandant le 1er régiment d'infanterie de la garde républicaine. Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est un honneur, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Portez à gauche. Gauche.
Emmanuel Macron just arriving in the stands, greeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi, then First Lady Brigitte. Major, what was that moment we just saw with the French president? What happened there?
After the Garde Républicaine saluted the president, they presented him the first detachment of who they were. It was the Garde Républicaine giving him the saluting him, giving him the honors.
And now we're still waiting for this to get underway. We're going to have the flyover a little bit later with the military jets. I believe we're still awaiting the first sort of initial performance by the International Military Band. These festivities due to run a little bit past midday. Is that correct, Major?
Exactly, yes.
And when we're seeing the stands full, who is there? Are those military families? Is that the French government? Who is in the stands behind the French president?
Behind the French president, you have most of the government.
The cabinet,
the cabinet and the government, the defense minister, his wife, and the guest of honor, Prime Minister Modi. And I see that you're missing a small detail. It's the corn flour everyone is wearing.
I wonder
their suit.
if that's because I'm American.
And
Someone didn't dare offer me
can
one.
I offer you one?
Here you go. Thank you,
Here it
Major.
is.
All righty. And this cornflower, what does it symbolize?
It's in France we call it the bleuet. It was first after the World War One. Nurses would make small flowers out of paper for the wounded soldiers, and they would raise funds with those paper flowers and try to make their life more easier. So this went through the 20th century and the 21st, and now we all try to wear it as much as possible on 3 occasions: 8th of May, 14th of July, and November 11.
Okay. And when we were talking about India earlier, 25 years of strategic partnership, but the relationship between France and India goes way back, and there were Indian soldiers fighting in World War One.
Exactly. We sort of have a debt to the Indian forces. More than 1 million Indian troops fought during the First World War, not only in France but in Middle East and all over the world. Approximately 50,000 Indian troops came to France as soon as 1914 to fight the Germans.
All right. And I believe we're having the international military band set to perform. I believe it's 15 people from France in that contingent, as well as members from Belgium, Canada, Czech Republic, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Portugal, Romania, and Spain. These, of course, Major, were France's partners in Africa's Sahel region.
Exactly. Those partners are really important to us because in today's conflict, pretty much any, no country can fight alone. And so this first scene, as you see here with the music band, is to show how the different partners in Africa contributed to restoring peace.
Yeah, let's cross to Philip Turrell at Place de la Concorde. Hello to you, Philip. Tell us a little bit about what's unfolding before us.
Well, we've had the going past us by Emmanuel Macron and Thierry Burkhardt, the head of the French Armed Forces. And now we're waiting for the Foreign Legion, which you may just be able to see behind me, which is going to start the parade down to Place de la Concorde, which is about 100 yards in front of me. Emmanuel Macron having taken his position, ready to review the troops. Just going back to what you were talking about just a couple of moments ago about the inclusion of foreign forces in this military parade. There are quite a few, as you were saying, in fact 15 who have helped France in its campaign in North Africa, and that is what is the theme of this Bastille Day parade today. It's called Moral Forces, and that I think it's very important for the French to make it clear that it's not just French forces taking part in the Bastille Day parade, but also forces from many other countries. So there are 6 military schools from Africa also taking part today in this military parade from Gabon, from Côte d'Ivoire, from Senegal, from Benin, amongst other countries that are taking part. But right now we're just waiting for the parade to get underway.
Reporting from Place de la Concorde, let's listen in to this international military band. my microphone live? Is my live? Microphone live? Just listening to that international military band there, Major. Tell us a little bit about the significance of these military bands.
Military bands have a really important role. Traditionally, it would motivate the troop, and it would help them giving orders to in the chaos of the battlefield. So it's really important to also give the pace.
Significant for the morale as well.
Exactly, it's really important for motivation and keep us going.
You know, for those of us that aren't musically inclined, we still understand the concept of rhythm and tempo. This also plays an aspect in terms of the parade and how the different regiments are marching and the tempos. Are they all walking at the same rhythm, at the same pace, or are there differences between them?
For 90% of the marching troops, they will be marching at 120 steps a minute for with the music playing alongside them. And at the end, you will have the French Foreign Legion stepping at a slower pace. That's I would say, a historical tradition dating back to the royal and first Napoleon era.
Okay, all right. Let's get a feel for things in New Delhi and speak to France 24's own Sarah Jacob. Hello to you, Sarah. On our screens at the moment, we see the French president sitting next side to Narendra Modi. Tell us a little bit more about France and India's relationship.
Well, France has been India's closest strategic partner in Europe historically. This is a relationship that transcends governments and parties. 4 French presidents, 3 Indian prime ministers have nurtured this relationship for decades. And Prime Minister Modi and President Macron are, in a sense, really just carrying out their responsibility of taking this legacy forward. The fact that we're seeing an Indian military contingent participate in the Bastille Day celebrations twice in 1 decade speaks volumes. It talks about the shared past of these two nations, a collaboration that goes back to the World Wars when Indian and French soldiers fought side by side in the trenches. France was the only Western capital to not impose sanctions on India after India after New Delhi carried out the Pokhran nuclear tests in 1998. After that, it took 10 years for India to get a nuclear security waiver agreement. And when that happened for India's nuclear plans, France was the first country to sign up for an agreement. India has for decades purchased its fighter aircraft from France. So the images we're seeing right now, are historic. They speak volumes. They speak about the value that both these nations see in each other, the determination of both these nations to build on a trust that they have, to build on a strong foundation of Indo-France ties, and to set the roadmap for the next 25 years in a changing world that is hurtling towards a new global order.
Surely, though, Sarah, there are some bones of contention, some points of disagreement.
Well, India and France don't see eye to eye on Ukraine, for example. But to quote Prime Minister Modi in words uttered on French soil, speaking with the Indian diaspora yesterday after he landed, he said, "The world is moving towards a new global order, and the role and capacity of India is changing with it." And understanding India's stand on Ukraine is possibly best understood by a country like France, which also values strategic neutrality, strategic independence, foreign independence when it comes to their foreign policies, and seeks a multipolar world. So what we've seen is that instead of dwelling on differences, President Macron has instead chosen to focus on the fact that perhaps India could play a role in brokering or mediating peace negotiations and restoring peace and stability to Europe in talks between the West and Russia, given New Delhi's historic ties and New Delhi's history with Russia. So in a sense, I think it's safe to say, Will, that perhaps the common goals between these two nations, whether it is containing a newly aggressive China and China's aggression in the Indo-Pacific region, whether it's working together on global issues like climate change, whether it's a defense cooperation. These common areas really override any possible areas of fiction that may arise.
And Sarah, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in France getting top honors, 269 troops marching down the Champs-Élysées Avenue. It's a big, big event here in France. How big is it in the minds of Indians where you are?
Well, India actually, we're going through a very difficult period right now. Now, I could use today's papers to tell you what I'm trying to say. Even as Prime Minister Modi is in France, the north of India has been hit by horrific floods because of an excessive monsoon, and the waters just aren't abating. Now, normally, a trip like this, Prime Minister Modi, and given the historic aspects of
Major, is this the 9 Alpha jets, the Big 9 formation that we're watching?
Exactly. This is the Big 9 formation of the Patrouille de France. It's the only formation they use for this event. You have the 8+1 pilots. Three of them are new pilots of the Patrouille de France, and they come from different fighting squadrons. They are celebrating this year their 70th birthday.
Okay, let's watch these images a little bit. So, Major, we're discussing that flyover. I think that's the beginning of the flyover. Still to come in total, we have what I believe is it 68 French military aircraft. We'll also have 3 Indian Air Force Rafale jets. Once again, showing that French-Indian connection.
Exactly. This is the Patrouille de France kicking off the whole parade, not only the air show, but after that, the marching troops. So we just had Patrouille de France, and now kicking off for the air show, you will have 3 Rafale from the Indian forces alongside a French aircraft.
These might be those 3 Indian Rafale coming down now. They're supposed to be early on in the flyover. Major, we're also going to have, for the first time on show, France's new F-4 Standard Dassault Rafale fighter jet taking part in this Bastille Day. Talk to us a little bit about the French technology and these Rafale fighter jets. It's a point of pride for France, isn't it?
It is. It's sort of the ambassador of how we develop new technologies. The F4 standard is the first brick of the interoperability connection bubble and how you work interconnectively with the other fighting jets.
Yeah, and still to come, we're going to have, I believe, in total, we have perhaps 68 aircraft. There are 47 from the Air Force, 13 from the National Marines, 1 civil security. There's 3 Indian Air Force, as well as 2 from the Royal Air Force of the UK participating in this. This, for many people, particularly the kids, I imagine myself on the Champs-Élysées as a young boy, this might be the highlight of the Bastille Day parade, this flyover.
You also exactly have the Eurofighter, who is on the air show today. So all these strong partnerships and allies show that we are always connected with them, and we work every year, every month in exercises to make sure that we can operate tomorrow together.
Yeah, and it's not just military aircraft. We're also having Bombardier, Canadair, airplanes that are used to put out forest fires. Earlier we saw an AWAC flying. So we're and larger planes that will carry out surveillance, maritime surveillance as well.
It's very important to say that all these assets, military Air Force assets, are here to for different missions, deterrence missions, protection, and surveillance missions. So all these assets can bring that to the French armed forces. You also have tank refueling airplanes for pilots, fighter pilots, to project their force all over the world. You have here an A400M for transportation and also for airborne troops in order for them to project their force not only on French soil but all over the world.
Yeah, and we're about 30 minutes into the celebrations, a little bit more than that, so we still have a way to go. When we look at the historical aspect of Bastille Day parade, has it evolved at all under Emmanuel Macron, different from what it was under his predecessors?
I think there are the two big changes under his presidency. Is the first of all is the budget effort that has been considerable for the past 5 years and for the next 10 years. So that's the first, I would say, the first change. The second is the geostrategic done all over the world. But that's not really due to him, but it makes us really try to change our way of thinking, change our way of operating on operation.
Let's cross to New Delhi again and speak to Saurav Jha, patiently waiting on the line. Saurav Jha of the director of the Delhi Defense Review. Saurav, thank you again for waiting on the line. Earlier we saw, I believe it was the Indian Rafale flying through in that flyover. Tell us a little bit about India's participation in that.
Well, we have 36 Dassault Rafales in our fleet right now, in the Indian Air Force fleet. They are not of the F4 standard, but the F4 standard itself has been a matter of discussion between the two governments, and indeed future iterations as well of the Rafale. As you can see, the Indian participation, we've heard the number 269, and the number of soldiers, the Indian Army soldiers participating, is about 115, and the rest are made up from the Air Force and Navy. It's especially symbolic because you have the Punjab regiment, which will the Punjab regiment is going to be marching down the Champs-Élysées in a while, and that hasn't happened for a century. The last time that happened, Europe was at war, just like it is at war now. So that symbolism is there as well. And of course, you will have a Rajputana Rifles regiment band as well that will be accompanying the Punjab regiment. So yes, the pomp and pageantry, the symbolism is all there, and it is quite clear that a message is being sent that it's a reaffirmation of what we always knew, that the Indo-French strategic partnership runs deep, runs old. France, not just France, in fact, refused to condemn India for its tests in 1998. Not only did France not impose any sanctions, France actually refused to condemn India for the nuclear tests. And in that, it was at variance with the United States. So that has also been there. That sort of bonhomie, if you like, that strategic bonhomie has always been there. And the India-France relationship is multifaceted now. It's a multifaceted global partnership. So.
All right. And Saurav, we'll speak to you again later in the program. We're going to cross to Claire Pacquelin, our reporter. Claire, watching that flyover, I'm imagining it's quite loud, but a lot of adrenaline probably going through everyone's veins who is looking up.
Absolutely, it's funny. Everyone sort of looks up. Lots of phones are in the air. People filming. Everyone moving at the same moment, watching the planes go through the air. They're really very close, actually. You almost sometimes feel like you want to duck. The noise, the sound is pretty deafening, and it really is quite a spectacle. I was just speaking to a gentleman who works for a company who is involved in making some of the engines in the French aircraft, and he told me he was just really curious to come and see what this parade is like. in person. He usually watches it on television, as millions of French people do. And today he's come here to see what it's like in person, because he's involved as an engineer in making the engines that go in those aircraft. Of course, we saw those Rafale fighter jets. France and India have that collaboration, that deal. The French are, of course, very proud of their Rafale. And we also saw the Typhoons, the Eurofighter, the Typhoon, of course, by the Royal Air Force. So really, this is an interesting movement. And as you can hear, the music's beginning now. So I'm expecting to see some, the ground troops will be marching past us just in a couple of minutes. Here they are. Here they are. We're getting the first of the marching troops behind us now. And of course, now all eyes are on the troops. The spectacle in the air is coming to an end, and now all eyes are on the Champs-Élysées Avenue.
And in a moment, we'll get that on our screen as they make their way towards Place de la Concorde. Claire, I want to ask you real quickly, earlier in the week, you got to meet some of those Indian troops that are taking part in this parade, and a lot of them seemed very happy and proud to take part. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, Will, I learned a Hindi word called Josh. This word is used only within the Indian armed forces, but it's known amongst most people in India. When you ask someone, how's the Josh? They will reply with, hi, sir, which is basically like saying, how's the motivation? How's the zeal in you? And the troops reply, it's really high. So I asked the troops, of course, this morning, how's the Josh? And their faces lit up, and they said, yeah, this is a really, really big moment for them. Yesterday, they had a trip up the Eiffel Tower. They took photos. That was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. And today, of course, they are marching on Bastille Day on the Champs-Élysées. India did have troops marching in 2009, but the Punjab regiment, who are actually at the very front of the Indian contingent, that regiment actually hasn't marched here in France since 1916, in the middle of the First World War. 900 men from that regiment lost their lives here in France. They're buried here in France. So more than 100 years later, the Punjab regiment marching again here in the French capital. Certainly they're feeling that it's a very symbolic moment, and they told me it's a morale boost for them as well.
All right, Claire, thank you very much. Claire Paquelin reporting major. First question, how's the Josh? I guess as she was saying, that Hindi word that evokes enthusiasm and zeal. We're seeing the parade make its way towards Place de la Concorde. So a lot of enthusiasm and confidence. And you mentioned earlier that when you took part in this 13 years ago, you were nervous, but very, very excited to take part as well.
Nervous, proud, but you need motivation. That's undoubtedly. You have the.
Do the young cadets know what they're in store for? I mean, does a rehearsal live up to the actual D-Day, as it were?
I think it is. Yes, it's the rehearsal part for the week before helps you go down and make it perfect for D-Day.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for them to arrive on the Place de la Concorde. Any idea of the order of the troops that are marching? Who arrives first, and what their rank is in the military?
First, you will have the invited troops. And
the Indian 269.
First of all, I think the African high schools, military high schools that are closely bonded to French military high schools. So they will be symbolizing all the young population in service of France. And then there you have the Indian armed forces.
With their very distinctive arm swing, yes.
It is really hard marching parade.
You have to do some stretching before you do that, I believe, Major.
You have all three services from the Army, the Air Force, and their Navy.
And they're also, based off of Claire Paquelin's reporting, we saw that they march with nails and metal hammered into their boots for an acoustic effect. So a lot of showmanship here as well.
This is really important for not only personal motivation, but marching is also a way to show your strength, your determination.
Well, let's listen in to them and look at these images as the Indian contingent makes its way into Place de la Concorde. Let's speak to Philip Turle, standing by at Place de la Concorde. Philip, the guests of honor have arrived where you are. Tell us a bit about what you're seeing. Lost that connection. Major, we just watched the Indian contingent pass by, 269 troops, as Claire Pacquelin was reporting earlier. First time that they've taken part since 2009. They just passed in front of French President Emmanuel Macron, their Prime Minister Narendra Modi. When you send a contingent abroad, how do you choose who goes, who doesn't? Is there an audition? What happens? How is it discussed for you when you participate in 2009? Who makes a choice of who's on the Champs-Élysées and who isn't?
When you are marching down the Champs-Élysées, you usually try to show their implication throughout the year. So you will have, for example, an airborne regiment will be going down the Champs-Élysées in its brand new Serval vehicle. And so that's one of the reasons. You also have specific operational reasons for them to show how they participated in the different operation.
Yeah, and we just saw a glimpse of those, was it the 6 African partners with cadets and the high schools and the military schools you were mentioning.
Yes.
They're marching into Place de la Concorde as we speak. Which countries do they come from?
You have high schools, military high schools from Senegal, Madagascar, Ivory Coast, Congo, Benin, Gabon, and Guinea. So they share a common interest of excellency, of discipline, of friendship, as their counterparts from the military French high schools.
And when we talk about these cadets, any idea how young some of them are?
They're around 16 to 18 years old.
Quite an honor to be taking part in the Bastille Day parade. Major, when we saw some of the people in the crowd earlier, we were talking about all ages. We also had an interview with one of the families there, 2 cousins that had participated, and one was set to watch their younger brother march as well. How big of a role does the military play for like families like your own, where your father was in the military, you're in the military? Is this a large part of the composition of the armed forces, military families?
Some servicemen have family traditions. I think most servicemen that are in the French armed forces find here a new family. So when you see them marching by, it looks like they're all brothers and sisters marching by through in front of the French president. It's a new family for them.
Very well said, Major. Let's speak to Philip Turle at Place de la Concorde. Philip, the march underway. You saw the guests of honor from India, the contingent marching, as well as the cadets from Africa. Tell us a little bit more about what caught your eye.
Well, certainly a very colourful spectacle, and many people have said, why is it that France has this military parade, probably one of the oldest military parades in the world that's existed since 1880, commemorating the siege of the Bastille in 1789. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. The first one being that France likes to know where its military money goes. Taxpayers' money to pay for the military. Emmanuel Macron has just announced a 40% increase in the military budget up until 2030, taking it up to 413 billion euros. He says that France is face to face with new threats in the world, particularly since the Russian war in Ukraine started in February last year, and that is why France has to be ready. France already wants to be independent of the United States as a military force within Europe. Emmanuel Macron has said many times since he was elected in 2017 that Europe needs its own army. Europe no longer should be dependent on other countries to provide it with backup in the case of conflict. So I think all of that shows that France wants to prove that it has its military capacity, and nowhere better to do that than on the 14th of July at this military parade taking place in Paris today, with all these different regiments parading down the Champs-Élysées, one after the other, to the Place de la Concorde, where Emmanuel Macron is reviewing them all, standing to attention with Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, who of course is the guest of honour today. So a very symbolic day, a very symbolic image of France. But underneath it all, I think the French people appreciate the fact that this is at least the only time in the year. There is one time every year where they can actually see the armed forces parading. And I think it's a general feeling of proudness for many French people to be here today, or certainly to watch this on television.
Yeah, and taking part on that parade, Philip, we have the armed forces. We also have some police marching. There were riots a couple of weeks ago, Philip, after a young man of North African descent was shot dead fleeing a police stop. Police, once again, facing accusations of racial profiling, excessive force. What needs to be done for the police in France to improve their image?
Well, I think there are a couple of important things that need to be done. The first one is that there has to be a realization in France that there is a major problem of integration of families of immigrant origin who moved here in the 1950s and 60s, were offered work. They came to France, they wanted to be part of French society, but nowadays they still don't feel fully integrated, and they still don't feel 100% part of France. So that is a big problem that the government has tried to overcome in recent years, and not ever really managed, despite umpteen efforts to try to improve social housing areas in the suburbs of cities and towns around the country. And it just takes a spark to upset the situation once again. So I think that is the big problem that the government has to come to terms with right now.
All right, Philip Troll reporting from Place de la Concorde. Major, a bit of nostalgia as you watch your screen.
Exactly. This is the Saint-Cyr Academy. They are training and teaching the next generation of officers.
The ones we just saw in the
class.
red pants, the red trousers.
Exactly, the red trousers, the cassowary, that's the name of their kepi, and they are training future officers, and that's the one I was marching 13 years ago.
Okay, and now you're a seasoned military senior ranking major.
Yes, exactly. I'm a senior officer. I work now at War College. I'm back on the benches for studying.
Okay, all right. Well, let's continue to look at some of these images of the parade. Yeah, it was interesting about seeing taxpayers' money at work, sort of like the return on investment. and Major, we just saw that quick clip of a helicopter. I think maybe that's foreshadowing about the helicopter flyover that's still to come.
Either foreshadowing the next helicopter parade,
Or else technical miscue.
Exactly, or just technical surveillance.
Yeah, okay. And tell us a little bit more about who is marching at the moment. Who are we seeing?
We have here the French NCOs. It's the non-commissioned officer school. They trained. So NCOs is I would say, the most important status. What they are technically well trained, and they support all the troops, all the officers, all the different chiefs on operations. So that's only for the army, as you see here.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get lucky and see that clip again. But we saw someone whispering into Narendra Modi's ear as he's watching the troops march past. What was that? What was happening there?
Prime Minister Modi seems very interested about all the marching troops, and you have the General Burkhardt, is the French Joint Chief of Staff, probably explaining to him.
There we go. That's him on his just over his right shoulder.
Yep. He is explaining with the translator all the marching troops, their mission, their goal, and what are the different challenges of those troops.
Yes, there we see him doing that as well. I guess he knows his stuff because we're in for a long ride of the parade.
Just before being a Joint Chief of Staff, he was the Army Chief of Staff, so he knows exactly this parade pretty much by heart. So you have seen here all the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers schools from all three services, from the Army, from the Navy, and the Air Force.
And the 5,000 strong, you mentioned that as a tip of the iceberg, might be up to 6,000. Is that in line with what we've seen previous years? Is that the same level, or the more or less?
Pretty much for the marching troops, that's more or less the amount of marching troops.
Let's speak to Philip Turrell at Place de la Concorde. Philip, Narendra Modi, a keen observer of the Bastille Day parade. Earlier, you were taking us through India and France's relationship. Tell us a little bit, though, about the sort of bones of contention. Is everyone happy about Narendra Modi's presence here in France?
No, far from it. And I think, first of all, some of France's neighbours are not particularly happy about it. Germany, for example, the United Kingdom, the United States, although Narendra Modi is due to travel to Washington for a visit there. But human rights groups and press associations have already criticised the visit by Narendra Modi to Paris. They say that basically democracy is under threat in India, that press freedom has gone shooting down. It's 168 out of 180 on the world index, the top country being Norway at number 1. So they say that Narendra Modi and the far-right BJP party is really clamping down against any dissent in the country, any opposition candidates. Rahul Gandhi, who is the leader of the Congress party, has been arrested for libel and looks like he won't be able to run in elections next year. So a lot of arguments against the visit of Narendra Modi to France, but France wants to be in a good relationship with India because it wants to use India to counterbalance Chinese influence in the South Pacific. That's the first point. The second point is that France wants to strike up business deals with India. It says India is developing, India is modernizing itself. France is the third biggest producer of weapons in the world, and it's selling lots of weapons and military hardware to India. And we've already seen that there will be a contract signed while Narendra Modi is in Paris for more Rafale fighter jets and for submarines. So that's all good news for French industry. As far as human rights are concerned, well, it doesn't look as though Emmanuel Macron is going to discuss that while Narendra Modi is in Paris. I think business is taking a preference over human rights as far as this visit is concerned, much to the dismay of many human rights organizations.
Yeah, and Philip, some of the regiments marching for India haven't been here since Europe was at war, World War I. Europe at war again now, the war in Ukraine, another bone of contention between India and France.
That is true, and the war in Ukraine has also annoyed France. This has really put a fly in the ointment, if you like. The fact that as far as France is concerned, India should stand up to Russia and condemn the war in Ukraine. India hasn't done that, and India is still taking advantage of cheap oil supplies from Russia as a result of the oil prices going down over the embargo on Russian oil. But the problem is that India has a long-standing relationship with Russia dating back to the Soviet Union. It's a large buyer of military hardware from Russia. And I think France would also like to wean India off buying military hardware, armaments from Russia, and buy them from France and from other Western nations. That's also part of the policy. And one other thing I think that France would like to do is to try to pull India away from its involvement in the BRICS. That's to say the grouping bringing together Brazil, India, Russia and South Africa and China, and try to make leeways into that group with its influence, the French influence, through India. Whether that will work out, nobody knows for the moment. But there are some calls in France saying in the short term, the relationship with India will be good because France will sell more armaments and keep good relations with India. But in the long term, it's unsure whether India will play into France's hands on the geopolitical side.
Yeah, so some questions there moving forward. Philip, we were talking about the war in Ukraine. Has that war changed the French public's opinion of its own armed forces?
Yes, I think so. I think, remember, back in 2018, Emmanuel Macron said that NATO was brain dead and didn't really serve a purpose. Well, the war in Ukraine has certainly put NATO back in the forefront of everybody's minds as an important organisation. We've just recently seen Finland joining in it, and now we know that Sweden is also going to join, having got the green light from Turkey. So there is, I think, worry in France about the future of Europe. The future of France's role in Europe. Will the war in Ukraine spread further? Will there be a solution rapidly? It's brought home the idea, too, the realization that war can take place on Europe's doorstep, the biggest conflict since the Second World War. And I think that's made people a little bit more aware that it's a good idea that France does have its own army, but maybe it would be even better if Europe had its own army, and that's something that Emmanuel Macron has been pushing for since he's been president of France.
Yeah, and Philip, are all the EU members on board with that idea of a European army?
I think most are on board. Some are less on board than others. For example, Germany has upped its military spending, which was something that was unheard of just recently. But I'm not sure that some of the Northern European or Southern European countries are quite so keen to get involved in building up a European army. But certainly that is something that will be a big challenge for the future. And Emmanuel Macron has made it clear that as far as he's concerned, France is going to keep spending militarily. He's upped the budget by 40% just in the last year for the next 7 years. That means that he thinks that there is a threat to Europe's sovereignty, and that it has to be prepared for example, for the eventuality that there may be conflict coming, which was something that until fairly recently nobody had any feeling that was going to happen anytime soon.
Indeed. Philip, thank you very much. Philip Turrell reporting from Place de la Concorde. Major, we heard Philip talking about the French public's opinion of its own armed forces with the war in Ukraine, war returning to Europe. You're from within the ranks of the French military. What was reaction like after that war broke out?
I think what Ukraine has shown us is that moral forces are vital to a nation. Resilience, how you fight back, confidence, trust to your partner, to your strategic partner, confidence in your equipment is vital for Ukraine's survival.
Are there concerns within the ranks about possibly this war spreading beyond the Ukrainian borders? We've already seen incursions into Russia, but beyond towards to the west, so to speak? That's
exactly what NATO is answering. We have deployed in a few days a small battalion within the Russian attack just in March of last year, and now we're about 1,000 French military troops stationed in Romania in the multinational battle group there.
NATO, we just had that big conference in Vilnius this week, some declarations coming out of that. Emmanuel Macron has been a key supporter of Ukraine, but at times there have been disagreements with other Western countries about what sort of military support, what sort of military equipment to provide. We saw Washington offer cluster munitions last week. They mentioned that. It's a very controversial weapon. Are you familiar with the weapon? Can you explain to us about why it's so controversial?
In the response to the Ukrainian conflict, you have, I think, two types of response. You have the NATO response. It's an operational response into strengthening the eastern border. And you have a capacity response. That's more of a European response in order to bring them what they need, and we have to respond to that need. So the cluster bombs are what the American responded, but what the French president responded is light armored tanks, and as well as artillery trucks, as for the César, for example.
All right, Major. Let's cross to New Delhi again, and we have Sarah Jacob back on the line. Sarah, hello to you. Thank you for being patient. We had some trouble with connection a bit earlier. We're talking about this being a major event on the French calendar, Bastille Day celebrations, of course, and you're telling us about whether this is in the forefront of Indians' minds. Tell us a bit about how it's being covered.
Well, it certainly is, but it is unfortunate that the timing has been that India, the north of India, actually has been struck by horrific floods after we had very heavy monsoon rain. So I'm just going to give you an image, a glimpse of two papers from this morning that shows you what ordinarily, when at a time, at a historic summit, in a meet, in a visit, a bilateral visit like this, we would have had page-to-page, cover-to-cover coverage of Prime Minister Modi's visit to France. This time round, it's split down the middle. On one side, you have the horrific floods that we're facing. This is the image of the national capital, the Red Fort, and as you can see, it's submerged at least 10 inches with water. And on the other side, you have the coverage of Prime Minister Modi's visit to France. Similarly, in the other paper today, you see the big headline, of course, that India giving clearance, the Defense Ministry giving clearance, giving the go-ahead to the fact that India will be buying those additional 26 Rafale M jets, but that the top half of the newspaper, the main primetime coverage shared by the floods. But of course, that said, this is an extremely historic visit. We have Prime Minister Modi today, who was awarded the highest honor in France, the Légion d'honneur, which is the first for an Indian Prime Minister, and really it encapsulates and highlights the value both these nations place on each other, on the strategic relationship, on their ties that are historic, and the determination that both these countries have to work together, to build on a foundation, a legacy of historic ties, and set the roadmap for the next 25 years, where the world is changing, and both France and India are united in their vision of a multipolar world.
Yeah, shifting geopolitical headwinds, Sarah, but given those floods that you mentioned, has that led to criticism of Modi being abroad right now?
No, actually, it absolutely, it hasn't at all. I think there's a very clear understanding in India that these are completely two different compartments of governance, and the Indo-French relationship, of course, a lot of coverage, a lot of press, a lot of build-up to that. India's defense capabilities entwined a lot with France. Many big headlines to take away from this visit. The fact that India has gone ahead and given the go-ahead, the clearance, the Defense Acquisition Committee met yesterday. They gave the clearance, a green signal for the acquisition of not just this additional 26 Rafale jets for India's Navy, for India's aircraft carrier, the fact that we're buying again 3 Scorpene submarines built in collaboration with France is also important, because it shows that India is diversifying its defense portfolio, and we're willing to step away, not putting all our eggs in one basket, which is buying all of our arms from Russia, which has been the case in the past. So this would also be seen positively by France in a world where there's a lot of tension over the global response to the war in Ukraine, trying to arrive at some sort of a united response to how do we find a solution to end the war in Ukraine. And in that sense too, it would be seen, it would be noted that India is stepping away from its defense, its dependency on Moscow for arms.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. Sir Jacob reporting from New Delhi. So the Bastille Day celebrations continuing. Let's watch for a moment as the parade heads down towards Place de la Concorde and take it all in. Well, we are about halfway through the Bastille Day festivities. Major, what are some of the attractions we're still waiting to see as the marching continues there on the Champs-Élysées Avenue?
The marching troops will almost take to an end. Then you'll have the helicopter, air show, and then all the vehicles.
All the vehicles, and of course a fireworks display later.
Fireworks all over France, but you also have specific static demonstration all over Paris, down in Town Hall, Place de la Nation, Parc André Citroën, different services from the Army, the Air and Space Force, and of course the Navy.
We know some towns have restricted the sale of fireworks amid this unrest we've seen in the country the past couple of weeks because of the riots tied to the shooting of a teenager last week. But fireworks, they play a central role in Bastille Day celebrations. Some are wondering if this might be the new normal, though, and how long those restrictions might last with fireworks. Have you heard anything yet?
I haven't heard anything special about those fireworks restrictions, but all these celebrations, not only military celebrations, show that we bond with the population.
All right, Major. Let's speak to Claire Paquelin, standing by on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Again, Claire, you got one of the best seats in the House, apart from the French president and the Indian prime minister, but still you're up front and center. Tell us a little bit about what's been catching your eye.
So we've just seen many of those ground troops go past now, and there's a moment of pause. We are waiting now for some of those armoured vehicles and the tanks. I can see them not too far away from me. Perhaps if Elodie, who's behind the camera, could just show far up the avenue. The armoured vehicles and the tanks are queuing up and waiting to be given that green light so that they can come down the avenue. So the people around me here are waiting patiently for that to happen. I just met an Indian woman who's made the trip from Rajasthan. She's here on holiday and she's come here today and she's absolutely thrilled. I can't tell you. She said she didn't have the words to describe how proud she was, because really the stars of the show here today are the Indian troops. They have a particular way of marching and they really have captured the public's attention. They're the stars of the show today. I've also been speaking to some young people, a couple of French people who were pretty awed by that flyover that we had earlier on. And now, of course, they're waiting patiently because a lot of the young people I've been speaking to today are really interested, actually, in the military hardware that's on show today. Other than in a museum, there is not really an occasion where young people get to see up close the tanks and the armoured vehicles which are used by the French army. So this really is an occasion for them to be just a few meters away from these really, really big aspects and pieces of military hardware. So that's another thing. Some of the fans who are today here watching out, they really want to get up and close and see, as engineers, how it all works.
And Claire, we see some of the crowd behind you, but give us a feel. Is it packed with people? Are there throngs lining up? How many deep are they standing on the Champs-Élysées Avenue?
It's not packed, and it's because of security reasons. Everyone was allowed in earlier on in the morning. Everyone who queued up, they had their bags searched. Our bags were also searched as we came onto the avenue. And then the police cordoned off with barriers, so no one can now get in. They had to get here before the parade started. No one's allowed to get through now. And the police were very careful about making sure that there's plenty of space. Perhaps Elodie could show us again now the avenue, the pavement here. There aren't so many people. You can walk freely, and that is deliberate. That's a deliberate effort from the police. They don't want big, thick crowds of people. They want to keep the situation easy to control because, of course, we have had these riots in France over the last fortnight, so security today is particularly tight.
All right, Claire, thank you very much. Claire Pequelin reporting. Major, who do we see on our screens now?
Here you have, they're not exactly military personnel, they're the customs helping us to control our border in a French on French territory here and on the metropolitan, but also overseas.
Customs officers, and down the road on the Champs-Élysées Avenue, marching towards us. That is the French Foreign Legion. We're going to see them for quite a while because they are. These are the slow walkers, if I recall correctly.
Exactly, the 88-step slow walkers.
Faster than I can walk.
They have their own music band for them to march down with the 88 specific step a minute. So here you have in front what we call the pioneers. They have an apron, a leather apron, and an axe on their shoulder, and a very specific beard. The tradition would be that they wouldn't shave unless the mission was accomplished. So now they kept it probably as a symbol of wise, old, very well experienced troops.
And superstitious, but impressive nonetheless. And we can see them walking in concert there. I heard some lore as to why they walked so slowly, saying that they were supremely confident. I don't know if that's the actual explanation. I think that would be something they wouldn't deny. Tell us a bit more about the French Foreign Legion, who they are and what role they play.
It's, I think, one of the most unique unit of the French armed forces. They gather servicemen from all over the world. The officers are French officers, but all of the non-commissioned officers, all of the volunteers are from all over the world. And they come in the Foreign Legion for 3 to 5 years, maybe more, and they serve France. So they are French. We say they're French for the blood they shed, and not for their nationality.
Okay, well, let's watch these images a little bit as they approach Place de la Concorde. Yeah, Major, we were seeing the Foreign Legion pass in front of Emmanuel Macron and Narendra Modi. Tell us a little bit more about the organization and what's different this year.
What's different this year is that after the military Foreign Legion band, you have the core of the Foreign Legion training unit with the 1st Regiment and the 4th Training Regiment of the French Foreign Legion.
Okay, and we're still waiting for the display of vehicles. We have a whole range of vehicles that will be following the Foreign Legion once they are finished. What are some of the vehicles we anticipate to see? Who are the stars of the show?
The stars of the show this year are two new vehicles going down the Champs-Élysées. The first one is the Serval. It's a light transportation infantry vehicle. And the second one is a light reconnaissance vehicle called the Grizzly.
And those vehicles, are they already in theaters of operations somewhere? Have they yet to be deployed?
The first regiment that has taken into account the Serval, for example, it was in last March in 2023. They will soon...
Helicopter flyover, just
Yes.
beginning, Major. Can you spot what is in the air at the front there?
First, you have the Gendarmerie Air Force, most of surveillance and control of different transportation axes for the Gendarmerie Nationale. Then you have the all three services have helicopters, which is quite unique. The Army has its own Army aviation with the Caïman transportation helicopters. You also have fighting helicopters, as you see here, the Tigre fighting helicopter from the Army aviation, and those here you have transportation helicopters from the Army aviation.
All right, well, we're going to watch this a little bit as the helicopter flyover continues on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Deidre, the motorcade has begun. Tell us a little bit about what's making its way down the Champs-Élysées.
Just a few seconds ago, you had the commanding general of the 3rd Division. A division is approximately 30,000 troops. It's General Kadapo who is commanding this division, who has a specific commanding general who is an American general.
Okay, Claire Paquelin on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Claire, the tanks just making their way by behind you. Tell us a little bit of what you've been seeing.
Well, everyone around me now fixed, all eyes on the Champs-Élysées. You can see armored vehicles just going past us. Everyone eyes on that. It's quite a spectacle. Now there's a little break, and in about 30 seconds you'll see some lighter armored vehicles driving past us. And this really is a chance for people to see up close what the French army uses on operations. It's a pretty rare opportunity for people. I was speaking just now to a young engineer who works for one of the firms that actually builds the French armoured vehicles, and he says it's just really exciting for him to be able to see the fruits of his labour. People here are just genuinely really pleased to be here. They've made the trip. They watch it on TV every year, but seeing it up close is a whole other matter.
Indeed. Claire, thank you very much. Claire Paquelin reporting. We'll speak to her later in the program. Major, I misspoke. Those are not tanks. Those are armored vehicles. Tell us a little bit more about their function, where they've been used, what sort of operations.
Exactly, you have here light reconnaissance vehicles going down the Champs-Élysées. They help us find a bit more about the situational awareness on the battlefield. Those reconnaissance, those are light transportation material from the Airborne Brigade. The Airborne Brigade is a very high readiness unit, always able to project its force.
A rapid response.
Exactly.
Okay. And those are some of the stars of the show as well, aren't they?
Exactly. Those are airborne proven, light, very small vehicles.
Okay. And who is driving these vehicles that we're watching?
The most of the drivers of those light vehicles are servicemen, volunteers.
Volunteers, okay.
And for the first time, you have the sand-colored vehicles. Or the first time they are down the Champs-Élysées. They are called Grizzly. It's also a light reconnaissance vehicle, and they're here for the first time. And just behind, light tanks from the AMX-10 RC that we have mostly given to the
And is that their first time participating because whatever engagements they had before are now over?
No, it's because we always have to upgrade our equipment.
Okay, so this is a new equipment being used in the parade for the first time. Okay.
And that is a very special regiment because that's the one I've served for 6 years. It's the 3rd Infantry Airborne Regiment. Going down the Champs-Élysées with the Serval. It's a brand new vehicle, and it's the first unit to have the Serval.
And what makes this Serval so special?
Also a very upgraded type of light infantry transport vehicle, able to do reconnaissance and specific missions.
Do we have a price tag?
Pretty much $1 million.
$1 million, okay. So quite a display there. And up next?
Up next you have light armored reconnaissance vehicles, also gathering intelligence, able to deploy very stealthily inside the battlefield.
All right. When we're watching this, and we've been discussing about how much preparation goes into it, we're seeing 5,000 to 6,000 troops on the Champs-Élysées Avenue, the capital of Paris, parts of it blocked off, of course, because of this. What is it like at the other end of the avenue before the parade begins? Is it mayhem? Is it where are all these vehicles parked before they come sweeping down?
as I was saying earlier, you will have the coordination and support troops that are guiding them out of Paris after that. It's very specific. Here you have also very specific light tanks called the Jaguar from the the Foreign Legion regiment.
And in such a carefully orchestrated parade like this, does anything ever go wrong?
You could have, I think, very small accidents, but usually they're very well orchestrated, and the coordination is quite astonishing.
And being a military man, there's a contingency plan. If something does go wrong, improvise.
Of course, planning is probably pretty much our motto.
Indeed. All right, well, let's watch these images a little bit more and zoom in to some of the spectacle happening on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Well, let's speak to France 24's Philip Turl at Place de la Concorde. Philip, I'm hoping we can hear you all right because a very large and noisy motorcade has made its way there. Tell us a little bit about what we've been watching.
Well, this is like getting towards the end of the parade. A little bit about the occupation more and how orchestrated it is. Many people.
Well, we're a little bit overambitious issues. Having trouble with connection with Philip. Major, tell us about some of the vehicles that have made their way past.
We've seen trucks, artillery trucks, that we have given to the Ukrainian armed forces.
Some of the equipment that's made its way up to the war.
Exactly, exactly. It's very tip of the top of technology, artillery trucks.
And
shells.
Which tank is this?
Those are what we call demining engineer heavy tanks.
Okay. And when we're seeing such heavy vehicles make down their way essentially on the world's most famous avenue, one of the questions I have that comes to mind is, can the road sustain it? These vehicles, I mean, roads weren't designed to have that sort of military equipment. Is a renovation after a parade like this?
There is a small, renovation. After that, everything is taken into account, and that's also part of the plan.
Sort of certain precautions with the tires that are being used, or chains on the tires?
Well, there are specific, chains in order not to have too much accident on that avenue.
Okay, what are some of those vehicles that
those are logistics vehicles able to sustain, bring combat service support to the combat units.
Okay, and still to come, what are we awaiting after this motorcade finishes?
After the motorized show, we will have also probably the firefighters also on their vehicles, and a show commemorating the 80th anniversary of the resistance medal.
Oh yes, a lot of tributes happening this year on the back of that. I think we have Philip Turrell on the line now, so we will try to speak to him at Place de la Concorde. Philip, tell us a little bit about the atmosphere where you are.
Well, hundreds of modern technology of applauding these vehicles going the far behind me.
Major, that's what we call the magic of live television. Having trouble with the line with Philip. Now we're seeing those are large trucks. What are those that we're watching?
The large trucks help us making sure the command and control of operations are well coordinated, and they help us go on the battlefield to have a good situational awareness.
And when we see this sort of display of France's military resources, how far does this go back? What's the historical significance of Bastille Day? How long have we seen a military parade like this? We say it's one of Europe's oldest.
Well, as you said at the beginning of this morning's parade, it dates back to 1799, but to 1790, to the day of the Federation in the 14th of July, which is actually pretty much the first parade dating back to 1790.
And then now on our screens we have fire engines making their way down. Have vehicles like this always been a part of the parade, or is there constantly something being added to the lineup?
What is specific about the firefighters, especially in Paris and in Marseille, is that they have a military status. And it's different from all the different cities, the French cities, which are what we call professional firefighters.
Okay, so this would be unique to France's two largest cities, a specific military status. That's why they're taking part.
Exactly.
Okay. And then we also know that with the firefighters coming up on Place de la Concorde, as we can see there, some of these vehicles, a little bit different than what you might see in other places, smaller because of their urban location. Let's speak to Claire Paquelin on the Champs-Élysées Avenue now. Claire, tell us a little bit about what's happening where you are.
So you might be able to hear everyone is clapping as the Republican Guard brings this part of the parade to an end. You can see them there on horseback as they make their way down to the Place de la Concorde. The last horses are going past me now as they make their way down. The clapping is beginning to come to an end, and this is the end of this part of the parade. This is what people came here for. We just saw the Republican Guard. Before that, we saw the firefighters who've been working very hard in the last couple of weeks, putting out blazes in and around Paris because of those riots that we've seen. They got a big applause as well from the crowds. And now you can see everyone around me is getting ready to go home because this is the end of the parade here on the Champs-Élysées Avenue.
All right, Claire, thank you very much. Claire Paquelin reporting there. We're still waiting for that Republican Guard to arrive at Place de la Concorde. Major, tell us a bit more about who the Republican Guard is and what their significance is within the military.
So at the beginning of the marching parade, you had the infantry, Garde Républicaine, and now you have the cavalry, Garde Républicaine. Both of them, their mission is to protect not only the Élysée Palace, but also the parliament. So they have a very strong connection to the head of state.
And how strong are their numbers?
For the infantry regiment, it's approximately 500 for the regiment, and for the cavalry parade, I'm not sure exactly how much are they.
And for people who might not be aware, but sometimes you can see them in the French capital just walking through the city, right?
Exactly. You can see them, during their surveillance patrols around the Assemblée Nationale, around the Élysée Palace. So, yeah, very strongly tied to the head of state.
Yeah, and when we're looking at this last bit of display with the Republican Guard due to arrive at Place de la Concorde, will that bring us to the end of the ceremony, or will there be something following that?
We will have, after that, sort of a commemoration last show celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Resistance Medal. And after that, it will be closing down the marching parade.
A big day of festivities. India, the special guest. From what we've seen today, this was a big honor for India and for Narendra Modi. He's done more to put India on the geopolitical stage and draw attention to that. Do you think that moving forward, India's influence will only increase?
The influence will increase, and the interests, our common interest between France and India, will always increase.
So we'll see closer ties moving forward.
That's the main reason of this anniversary of these strategic partnership, yes. And it will take place throughout the year, through the next, I think, at least 20 years, of course.
Okay. All right. Well, let's take a closer look at the Republican Guard arriving now at Place de la Concorde. We about to hear France's national anthem, La Marseillaise. Let's listen in.
Ici, nos voitures, nos marchés.
Major, that was not the national anthem La Marseillaise, but rather Le Chant des Partisans, one of the most beautiful songs in France. Tell us a little bit about its words and its meanings to be sung today.
Well, the Chant des Partisans is the perfect symbol of resistance during the Second World War, national resistance. It was created by Joseph Kessel, who was a Free French fighter in 1943. We're celebrating this year the 80th anniversary of the creation of the Resistance Medal and of this song. So you have here all young population surrounding the core of the French army, and well, it's the transmission of those traditions.
Yeah, what's the meaning of the words of the song?
Well, fight back, resilience, moral forces. Those are I think, the main topic of this song.
We're still waiting to see what's next in this conclusion of the Bastille Day festivities. Major, from your point of view, from what we've seen, Emmanuel Macron and Narendra Modi must be feeling what at this moment?
Well, I think he's quite astonished by the different troops that have been going down the Champs-Élysées, the air show, and now the transmission to the young population. You will have here, they will read a letter from Jean Moulin. He's a very well-known resistance hero, a national hero who died in 1943, so also the 80th anniversary of his death.
Yes, a very important moment that we're watching on our screens. Claire Paquelin standing by on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. We can speak to her now. Claire, hello to you. Nearly at the end of this Bastille Day festivities, what were the highlights for you?
Where I am now, Will, almost everyone has gone home or is making their way home. This part of the avenue, the festivities have finished now. In terms of the highlights, certainly everyone liked the aircraft because they come so close and the noise is so loud, and you almost feel like you can make out the detail in the aircraft. And most people don't get the chance to see that kind of military aircraft very often up close. Another highlight for many people here, the Republican Guard, because it does look very impressive as you see them coming on horseback. Hundreds of horses, around 200 horses were parading. There was, of course, also the dogs, the sniffer dogs who work in the army. They sniff out explosives. They were parading here as well, so that's always a highlight for people. And the firefighters, they always get a big applause, and of course they got a particularly big one this year because of the hard work they've been doing in the last few weeks, putting out blazes in Paris and around Paris, and these riots that we've seen. So I would say several highlights. Most of the people I've been speaking to here today were pleased because actually they could get very close to the action. There weren't that many. The avenue is very big, and so really people who make the effort to come, they have to get here a bit early. I saw people here at 6, 7 in the morning, but if they make the effort, they can get really quite close to the action.
And Claire, also the other stars of the show today were the Indian troops, and you mentioned earlier about their distinctive style. Tell us a bit more about that.
So, of course, the Indian troops, we had the Indian Army, the Punjab Regiment, we had the Air Force, and we had the Navy dressed in white. Now, where I was standing, unfortunately, people were not able to see the Indian troops go past because they were much further up. They were ahead. They were right near the very beginning of the parade, closer to the Place de la Concorde. So we weren't able to see them actually parade today. But I did, of course, spend a day with them earlier on in the week as they were rehearsing here at the crack of dawn on the Champs-Élysées, and as they were rehearsing in Satory, which is a base just outside Paris, near Versailles. That arm swing that they do is particularly impressive for French troops because French troops don't swing their arm back like that. And they kept asking the Indian soldiers, how do you do it? Do you need to do special exercises, special training? How do you do it? And the Indian soldiers replied, no, this is just part of our basic training. This is how we've been marching forever. This is just normal for us.
All right, Claire, you mentioned earlier that Hindi word Josh. I would like to congratulate you for your Josh today, Claire. Claire Peckland reporting from the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Major Antoine, I also want to thank you for participating in France 24's Bastille Day coverage. We're going to end now with La Marseillaise, France's national anthem. We're going to listen in and watch these at the end of the Bastille Day celebrations on the Champs-Élysées Avenue. Well, that's it from me and France 24's special coverage of Bastille Day celebration. Stay tuned. News coming up in a moment.